We're given a function in standard form, 12x squared plus 24x plus 48. We would like to convert the standard form of the function into the vertex form of the function presentation. So how do we do that? Notice that we have a binomial that will be squared. And the only way to achieve this binomial being squared is to find the perfect square trinomial. All right? So you find the perfect square trinomial by completing the square. Okay, and notice it's called the vertex form because there participate the vertex coordinates h comma k. So we need to find those numbers, of course, if you want to achieve the vertex form. And the a value is pretty straightforward. The a value will be this a value that you know in the standard form. 12 is equal to a. So the first thing that you want to do, you want to factor out the greatest common factor of these three numbers and constants, 12, 24, and 48. You know that the 12 is the greatest factor of these numbers, so you take it out. You're going to have x squared plus 2x plus 4, right? Because these are the respective numbers that when you multiply back to 12, you get the original polynomial. All right, so now that you took care of the factoring, you want to transform this trinomial into a perfect square trinomial. And again, the perfect square trinomial can be expressed as a polynomial with two terms, namely a binomial being squared. Right now, this cannot be expressed as a binomial being squared. No matter how hard you try, you will not be able to do it. So you need to complete the square in order to create a perfect square trinomial. All right? So again, to do this, you need to complete the square. And I'm going to leave some space. You're going to see why. And this is going to be 12 times x squared plus 2x. So the way to complete the square is to write the first two terms, as you see. And then the next term will be adding the coefficient of x, which will be 2, and then divide that by 2, right? So the formula tells you take the coefficient of x, which is in this case 2, and then divide it by 2. And when you divide this by 2, make sure that you square this whole result. All right, and then copy down the last. And remember, the reason why I left some space on the left side is because whenever you do something on the right side, on one side of the equation, you have to do the same thing on the other, right? So we have to add. Now, you might be careful not to make a mistake. If you just add 2 over 2 squared, you will be wrong. Because notice that you're not just adding this, you're adding the product of 12 and this, right? Because this thing multiplies the 12, right? So you can't just add 2 over 2 squared. You have to add the entire product. 12 times 2 over 2 squared, all right? And that will make sure that you get the proper result. So let's see. So what do we get on the left side? On the left side, 2 over 2 is 1. 1 squared is 1. 1 times 12 is 12, right? So fx plus 12 is equal to 12 x squared plus 2x. And then what do we get here? We just get 1, right? Now, you might be tempted to say, can I just add 1 and 4? No, never do that. If you add 1 and 4, it will no longer be a perfect square trinomial. The reason why this is a perfect square trinomial is because you created it just now by adding this third term. You do not want to combine these two constants. It will no longer be, if I wrote, let's say, x squared plus 2x plus 5, this is no longer a perfect square trinomial. So you want to keep these two separate, right? You want to leave the 1 as it is, 1 squared 1, and then take out the 4. But now another problem. If you take out the 4, you can't just write plus 4 because just like in this example when we added on the left side, we had to keep the 12 being in there, right? So for the same thing here, same reason, you can't just add the 4. Remember that 4 multiplies the 12. If you add the 4, you will be wrong. 12 times 4. So you want to add the product of 12 and 4. All right? And not just 4 outside. So now we have the perfect square trinomial. And why is it a perfect square trinomial? You will see why. So also don't forget that you want to subtract 12 on both sides so that your fx is by itself on the left side, right? Because you want to express it, you see there's nothing on the left side but the f of x. So 12 times. Now how do you express this as a binomial being squared? Now that you're sure that this is a perfect square trinomial. You know that the x is to the first power, all right? So you know that you're going to square that binomial. So what is that number that stands instead of minus h? Well, just like in this step, you're going to take the same coefficient of x plus 2, and you're going to simply divide it by 2 again. But unlike the previous step here, the beginning step of completing the square, you do not square it. You do not square it. And why do you not square it? Because you already have a square outside the parentheses. If you squared it, you will over square basically, right? You don't want to over square. So you just want to divide this coefficient by 2, and that's it, because there's already a square in that formula that expresses the binomial being squared, right? So that's it, right? And the last term, of course, is going to be what? That will be 36, right? 48 minus 12, 36. So now, as a result, you are ready to express this in vertex form, this function. So that's going to be x plus 1, right? Because 2 over 2 is 1, squared, plus 36, right? So we can circle this, and I want you to notice that the vertex, we found the vertex coordinates, right? Even though it's not required, but I want you to see what the vertex coordinates would be. Notice that minus h is equal to plus 1. You might say, why the sign's different? Well, that doesn't matter. Don't worry about the signs. Just make sure that you understand that minus h, the minus is part of that, right? The formula minus is part of that whole number that will follow the x. So minus h is equal to positive 1. So that means h is equal to negative 1, right? Take a look at this. So minus h is equal to positive 1. So if you divide both sides by negative 1, that means h will be equal to negative 1. Make sure that you understand the differences in these signs and don't confuse yourself. So h is negative 1, and for the same reason, positive k is equal to positive 36. Well, that's pretty obvious, right? The pluses match, so there's no confusion anywhere. You don't need to be confused. 36 is the k value, right? So thanks so much for watching. See you in the next video.